Okay, just to get in a little more meat and potatoes of each of the different age divisions of record books. Of course, our junior record books is, again, based on 4-H age, like everything else is. Essentially, the forms will focus on one main project for the current 4-H year. We do realize that there are first-year 4-Hers that attempt 3 or 4 projects, or maybe they have an older sibling that are already doing multiple projects, so they just follow in line. But truly, we want the juniors to kind of pick their main project that they focus on and put a lot of emphasis on that in their reports. But there will be opportunity if they do explore other project areas to include it in the forms. Part of the forms includes just a diary of activities that they're doing, and of course then they'll still do their story and photos, and so other project areas could also be reflected in that. So the required documents for the junior record book would be just the simple personal information page. It is very similar to our old personal information page. It just, name, address, number of members in your club, that sort of thing, real basic stuff. The junior report form is again, kind of talks to them about setting some goals, and then it is a diary of their experiences, and then some additional questions that they'll respond to. And actually, for the junior forms, the story is actually part of the report form. The story is broken up into sections, and so we kind of have subsections with the story that address things, and you'll get to see here in a minute when we do the demonstration how that plays in. And then they can add photo pages, up to 3 photo pages at the end of their report, which includes their story. And so for judging purposes, they'll turn in the required documents, which are those 3 items listed right above, with current year's information only. And then they can put in, so this year they'll use the new forms. If they want to if they had a record book last year on the old forms and they want to put it at the back of their book, that's fine, but they will only be judged on the current year's form. And then each year they'll just kind of build on and keep adding the new form with the current year's information. So it's not going to be the 4 years worth of information into one form. It potentially could end up with 4 years of information, or I guess really not for a junior age because of their age. But it's just going to be current year information that keeps getting, and you just add the new forms on top of the stack. So the report form itself, the sections within the report form that are online in the paper version is, again, setting 4-H goals. We're asking them, rather than to summarize everything, we think it's important for them just to start learning record-keeping skills. And really that's the more age-appropriate approach for this age division, is for them to just start creating habits of keeping records. And so rather than trying to summarize everything at the end of the year, there's a diary, which is part of the report form, where they'll just basically log when they go to a club meeting, when they go to a workshop, when they do, self-study at home, whatever the case may be. They'll just log onto the system, and throughout the year, plug those activities in as they go. Of course, the 4-H goals, we're asking them to set those at the start of the year. So if they have not already set goals for their project, we would encourage you to pass on to them to go ahead and do that and go document those goals on the report form and save it. And then again, toward the end of the report form, so really what they would do at the end of the 4-H year to summarize stuff is simply write their story. And as I mentioned, it's kind of broken up into 6 small text blocks to address some different questions and statements, to tell their story. So that's the extent of the actual report form. So they've done their personal information page, complete these 3 sections of the report form, and then add 3 pages of photos. And so that's it. That's the junior record book. So moving along, we'll move into the intermediate level record books. Again, it's kind of building on what they've already started doing as far as record keeping with the junior divisions, and expanding a little bit more, but not quite to the level of the senior book yet. So again, for our intermediates who want them to focus on one main project for the current 4-H year, but they do have an opportunity to spotlight other project areas, again, in different parts of the report form. But, truly, I think sometimes the families feel a lot of pressure when we say we want 4 years of information on up to 4 projects. And, granted, again, if you're a younger sibling of someone who's been in 4-H, or you're, 3 generations of 4-Hers in your family, and you just dove in, head first, great. But then, for the brand new families, that's some of the feedback we were getting at the volunteer conference was like, if you didn't know the lingo, and we thought we were doing good keeping our goat or our chickens alive for the first 2 years of 4-H, and that's all we did, and how do we compete with someone who's doing 6 project areas, and how good are they doing 6 project areas if the kid's only 10? And so anyway, we really, again, thinking back to youth development principles, didn't want to overwhelm them. So required documents for intermediates, again, would be the personal information page, the intermediate report form, and then separately, they will do their 4-H story and photo portfolio. Now, there is an opportunity for them to actually type up their story and photo portfolio all within the online system. However, they're not required to. If they wanted to just go type it up in Microsoft Word or whatever format they wanted to, they could, but there is an opportunity to type it up in the system, which Derek will spotlight here in a minute. Just the story is not part of the report form for intermediates like it was for juniors. So again, for judging purposes, they would turn in the 3 required documents that are listed above using the new forms, and each year they'll just do a new form and add it to the stack. So basically, in 2 years from now, they'll have, 2 years of their report forms stacked in their book with the most current on top. Essentially for intermediates, whereas as we are judging juniors, we're only going to judge them based on their current 4-H years worth of activities. For intermediates, we'll actually start looking at more growth and development, and so we'll actually judge them based on 2 years, up to 2 years worth of activities. And so again, for intermediates, if they had a record book, the old forms of record book from last year, they'll simply put their old record book forms, now not the whole story and everything, just simply the report form, in the back of their record book with their new form for the current year on top. And then for judging, judges will basically flip between the two to look at some growth and development. And so, they'll be judged on 2 years worth of involvement at the intermediate level. Again, just to highlight the sections of the actual report form itself for the intermediates, building on where we had the juniors set goals at the start of the year. Again, at the start of the 4-H year, we want intermediates to set some goals and then further identify some of their project plans. Again, with the juniors, we had them just kind of do a diary log. For intermediates, we're calling it a personal journal. And they'll include some additional activities in that, and it asks for a little more detailed information related to that personal journal. So again, developing those skills of just keeping records and getting in a healthy habit of doing that. And then toward the end of the 4-H year, they'll have to also summarize their activities and accomplishments, their recognition and awards, community service, leadership, those sort of things. So that's the section they will really need to focus on toward the end of the 4-H year. And then, of course, by still doing their story, that's kind of summarizing their 4-H involvement up to this point. Any questions before we move into the seniors? Y'all probably understand it a lot better. We probably should have done the demo on the front side of it, so this would all make a little more sense. But, it's very... it will be a lot easier if they do the different sections at the different times of the year when they really should versus waiting to the end. So again, setting your goals and project plans at the start of the year, working on your personal journal as things happen throughout the year. So then you just really have to do the last little section of summary of activities and accomplishments at the end of the year with your story. So again, hopefully they'll get in that habit. Micah, we'll talk a little bit more about the photo and story portfolio details here in just a minute. They're pretty close. Seniors, you'll notice when we do the demo, the senior forms are going to look very similar to our old record book system, which we think was certainly age appropriate for senior level. It just definitely was probably a little too complex for our juniors and intermediate. So anyway, with that being said, that we will focus on up to 4 projects related to our seniors. They're encouraged to set goals at the start of the year and adopt a record-keeping system that kind of meets their needs, but there's not like a set place in their forms where they would document what those goals were. We feel like by the senior level, everybody's kind of come up, hopefully developed some record-keeping skills and have come up with a system that works for them, whether it's the calendar, the spiral notebook, the dry erase board in the barn, whatever the case is, because again, the forms themselves are going to be more summarizing and reflecting on their experiences as they have kind of been in the past, and not necessarily a daily log of what they've done in 4-H. So the required documents for a senior record book would again be the personal information page, the senior report form, which are sections 1 through 7, and we'll get into more detail on that in a minute, and then the story and photo portfolio. Again, for judging purposes, they'll turn in the required documents using the new forms, and then also include, last year's record book at the back of it. And so judging will be based on 4 projects for up to 4 years. So after they do their report forms, say they do these online reports for a senior level this year, next year when they do, if they're still in 4-H next year and they do another round of senior level reports, it's still going to focus on basically up to 4 years worth of information, but we'll also have the old report forms behind it to be able to compare to. The report forms itself, the sections 1 through 7, we'll talk about here in a little more detail. And again, they're going to look very similar to what y'all have seen in the past if you're familiar with the record books from previous years. They'll talk about their 4-H project experiences. Now, one thing that we did change based on y'all's recommendations and volunteer recommendations was, instead of having the single page of what is your project, how did it change or grow, and then you had another section that you had 2 pages worth of space of what have you done, what have you learned. Those have been combined all into section 1, your project experiences, so you have 3 pages to get that accomplished. So you'll basically address all 4 of those questions in section 1, so that it's not quite so choppy. The section 2 is leadership. It has been set up more as a chart format versus just a big blank white sheet of paper, and so they'll document their leadership experiences based on the criteria that's requested in the chart. Community service, same thing. Other 4-H projects will still be a half-page section for them to spotlight anything beyond those 4 projects that they spotlight in section 1. 4-H awards and recognition, again, is a chart format. Non-4-H activities, they'll still have a page to do that. And then the last section that we added was a college and career exploration, and again, it's a chart format. Hopefully these kids are spending some time as a senior level 4-H'er starting to try to figure out what they want to do with their life. And so whether it's visiting technical schools or college campuses, or doing some sort of self-study to learn more about careers, that sort of thing. So there's an opportunity for them to document and log that as well.